The meeting's now recording.
Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. I'd like to call the MWPA board meeting of February 18th, 2021 to order. Allison, will you please call the roll?
Bolinas Fire District.
Present.
City of Mill Valley.
Here.
City of San Rafael.
Here.
City of Larkspur.
Here.
County of Marin.
Here.
Inverness Fire District.
Here.
Kentfield Fire District. Marinwood Community Services District. Muir Beach Community Services District.
Here.
Novato Fire District.
Here.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District.
Here.
Southern Marin Fire District.
Here.
Stinson Beach Fire District.
Here.
Town of Corte Madera.
Here.
Town of Fairfax.
Here.
Town of Ross.
Here.
Town of San Anselmo.
Here.
A quorum is present with 95.69% of the membership.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. So we're item number 3 is entertain any requests to adjust the order of the agenda. And I am seeing none. This is item number 4. Then this is open time for public expression. We're accepting public comments over Zoom and by telephone. If you're participating by phone and you wish to provide comments, please press *9. And once you press *9, wait until you hear a notification that you have been unmuted. Then you'll be able to speak for 3 minutes. If you're submitting public comments on Zoom, please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. So do we have any public interested in any comment right now at this point?
The first comment will come from Debbie Montana.
Okay, welcome Debbie, you're on.
Hi everybody, my name is Deb Montana. I'm a president of Sequoia Ecological Consulting. We're a woman-owned small business in the East Bay, and I'm calling in to learn more about your program. Sequoia has extensive fuels management experience on the implementation and planning side. And I love the fact that you're all gathering and creating strength in numbers to get this very important work done. And we'd like to figure out ways that we can help you with your program. One of my most important questions right now is I see that you have your vegetation management meeting tomorrow to review BMPs for your fuels reduction projects. And we have a lot of input on that. We have extensive experience, as I'd mentioned, and I think we could add a lot of value to that. But I also want to make sure that by attending those meetings, I'm not precluding our ability to respond to your soon to be released RFP for the fuels implementation work coming up. I just want to make sure, I'm not creating a conflict by providing comments on, how you implement the work. Does that make sense?
No,
I'm still muted. Everyone's really quiet.
Yeah, we are not really allowed to comment on your input here, but thank you very much.
Okay.
You can certainly pursue resources to answer those questions. I encourage you to do so.
Our next public comment will come from Carolyn Longstreth.
Carolyn. Hi, welcome. Welcome,
Hello,
Carolyn.
Everyone. I'm Carolyn Longstreth. I'm with Fern and also ESP, California Native Plant Society. I just wanted to raise something. I went through the packet and I read the minutes of the various meetings that are there, and it struck me as odd and not too helpful that the minutes don't give the content of the remarks made by members of the various committees. And I didn't understand what the reason for that might be. And it isn't so helpful for people reviewing them to determine what went on. So, just a suggestion to go ahead and summarize what the various members have said.
Thanks. Thank you, Carolyn. Well understood. Appreciate your comments.
And I'm looking for any further raised hands from our audience members. And there is no further public comment.
Okay, thanks, folks. So let's move on to the executive officer's report. Mark Brown, will you please give us an update on what's going on?
I'd be happy to. Good afternoon, President Goins, board members. Start off with the executive committee. Again, excellent feedback in the development of the agenda for today and getting it to where I believe we're going to have it into a imaginable time frame. And I would also, and I'll mention this later on, but thank them. I'd like to thank them for the great feedback for the environmental consultant RFP. During the last environmental or executive committee, we created a communication strategy development ad hoc subcommittee. It includes Catherine Donahue, Gabe Paulson, Paul Jeske, and Steve Burdo. And the idea is for them to work with me and some communication strategists that are connected with Fire Safe Marin in order to develop a communication strategy for the MWPA. And we went that route because we have funds budgeted for public outreach that is going to Fire Safe Marin, and we've only gotten to the 35% of that budget, and we felt that we had the budget space to be able to make that type of move. And we were just seeing many indications that it's time for us to launch on a communication strategy and get our word out there more effectively and consistently. We had a finance committee meeting yesterday where we proposed, Allison, or Elisa Schiffman and I proposed a budget framework for the 21-22 budget, and it includes a carve out of the 60% for the ops committee to start working on their core projects for the 21-22 work plan. After they start creating line items, that'll be injected into the budget for finance committee review and ultimately for your board's approval. Speaking of the ops committee, they've started their work on the framework for the core projects. They have the 5 geographical areas working with each other and scoping out the desired projects, and then they'll pass that along to the advisory technical committee to start refining. Moving on to the advisory technical committee, they are ready to receive the broad outlines from the ops committee. They're also working on a form to improve how our budgets or excuse me, our projects are presented both to the board and to the public. You remember the 2021 work plan and the project forms weren't as descriptive as we need them to be. So Lynn Osgood from Nevada Fire is taking that on, and it's kind of a project proposal form. It's going to be the same whether it's for core projects or if it's for local mitigation projects. If it's for a core project, then it's subject to board approval. If it's for a local mitigation project, we're calling it an advisory. That way the MWPA can see what projects are being done through the local mitigation monies, and we can be sure that the member agencies are not supplanting other services that they had already been doing, and that MWPA funds are going towards local mitigation projects. Citizens Oversight Committee continues to work on their bylaws, and they may or may not bring it to a vote depending on how much traction they get between now and Tuesday. They vote to move their bylaws to your board for approval. And I had a conversation with a few of you about a recent report from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, a very comprehensive case study of the campfire and the fire progression timeline. I'm in the process of reviewing it now so I can provide better feedback to you. I'm happy to share the link with any of you, if not all of you. But what it's made clear is that the track that we are on is the right track. Absolutely. The house out approach and making sure that people can get out of harm's way quickly and effectively is the path that we need to go. Some recent news, a news release you may have seen from Insurance Commissioner Lara, working with the Newsom administration to establish home and community hardening standards for the insurance industry. The partnership aims to lower wildfire risk, protect homes, and make sure insurance is more available and affordable. Exactly how that's going to roll out is yet to be clear, and it could put some more responsibility on the homeowners to make sure that their homes are fire safe in order to maintain their insurance. However, I believe the MWPA will be well positioned to support the homeowners within our jurisdiction to meet the goals of this endeavor with the Commissioner Lara. Another thing that we did at the executive committee is approved our application process for a fellow with Grizzly Corps. Grizzly Corps is an offshoot of AmeriCorps, And they provide recently graduated college grads as fellows to try to create depth and bandwidth within organizations such as ours that go towards resiliency, whether it's forest resiliency, fire resiliency. And we have, the executive committee gave me permission to go ahead and apply. We would get an 11-month term from the fellow. The cost would be $20,000 for the NWPA. And if we get accepted for that fellowship, then we would come to the board for the approval of the expenditure of the $20,000. And some of the projects that we're identifying for Grizzly Corps would be supporting our smaller West Marin agencies, because they are really geared towards helping small communities and develop the depth within those communities. We're having them look at and develop educational materials so we can get the culture change that we need within our communities to accept home hardening and what fire safe landscaping looks like. And then finally, looking 2 or 3 years ahead, as we start looking after we've tackled some of our home out approach issues, and we can start looking at the bigger landscape, we're building in a project that they will start connecting with stakeholders now, what larger projects could look like, and what challenges we may have to get those approved or get those accepted. Start developing that conversation now, so when we're ready to do it, we've already laid that groundwork. Moving on to Zonehaven, we have a very successful meeting, kickoff meeting yesterday for the entire county. Zonehaven said it was the largest participation of a kickoff meeting they've had. And today we identified what's called the multi-agency team leaders that will work together to start implementing, building the public safety zone, the public safety approved zones and evacuation routes. And we feel that we're on track for a 3 months buildup and implementation in sometime in May. Primary goal, get it done before fire season so we have an effective evacuation tool. You'll probably notice that in our packet, we have the conflict of interest code that's in there. And we chose to file with the county. This question has come up a couple of times. We chose to file with the county because it allows us to use their online form, and their online form, if you have already started filing with them, then all you have to do is click another box for another agency, and it really makes that filing that much easier. So I just wanted to head that question off since I've gotten it a couple times. And then I talked about this with Director McMillan, and we thought it might be good for me to do a screen share and go into Marin Map and show the new layers that we have in Marin Map that are specific to the JPA, and a quick walkthrough of the story map for our CWPP. So if you guys give me a thumbs up and you think that's a good idea, I'll launch down that track. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I hope you all see the map of the County of Marin right now.
Yes.
Excellent. So when you go to marinmap.org, you will see map viewer. You click on map viewer, and this is what you'll get. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is go over here and accept disclaimer. Quite honestly, I haven't read all of it, but I'm assuming it's all good. Maybe Megan read all of it. I don't know. And then I'm going to just walk through some of the layers that I think are good layers for our directors to look at. One of them is in base maps. And if you go down and you see park, and the reason why I bring up park is you start seeing the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and the Point Reyes National Seashore in dark green. That's all our federal lands in the county. And this is about the only way you can see which lands are federal and which lands aren't. This other green are the state parks, or this green up here, the lightest of the green is state parks, and the darker the green is parks and open space, whether it's city or county parks and open space. I'll go ahead and turn that layer off, and I'm going to go to where you see other administrative districts. If you hit that plus sign right there, you see Marin Wildfire Authority, and we have our own layers. So first you have to click on other administrative districts, And then if you click on the plus sign next to Marin Wildfire Authority, you see the layers that are specific to us. And thanks to a recommendation from Director McMillan, I was able to work with Sonoma Technologies to get the the parcel level hazard analysis to be put into Marin Map. So now the same thing that's in the CWPP is now on Marin Map. And you can literally search by address by this button right here, type in an address and it'll zoom in on that address for you. And you can see where that property is in regards to the parcel level hazard risk analysis. And then if you click on this button down here for treatable areas, it shows the treatable areas as per the Cal VTP, which is going to be important as we start using the programmatic EIR from the Cal VTP. Our JPA agencies are listed there. So you see that shaded area, almost all the county as our JPA agencies. And the last layer I want to touch on is the state responsibility area. And it's hard to see, the color is hard to notice, but once you zoom in and you toggle it on and off a couple times, you'll see the SRA. So the SRA, all the treatable areas of the Cal VTP are technically in the SRA. However, not all of the SRA is in the treatable area. So if there's any questions on Marin Map before I go over to the story map, I can take them right now. All right.
Barbara Kohler has a question.
Yes, just Mark, I know I was the one that sort of bugged you to get the SRA and the Cal VTP areas in there. Could you show those again? Because I think if we were going to use the state PEIR, we'd have to be within the Cal VTP. And so is there an overlay there on us, or could you show me an example?
So I'm zooming in now. I hope you guys can see how I'm zooming in.
So what color is the Cal VTP? Because I don't know that. We don't see the legend.
So when you go in yourself, you'll be able to see the legend, but I'll turn it on and off so you can see the difference. That piece that's coming on and off is the treatable areas within the Cal VTP. Does that help?
Okay, so that would, just looking at that roughly, and I'll go in and look at it. Thank you for this. It looks like a good portion of really West Marin, but almost very little or nothing of the rest of the jurisdictions are within the Cal VTP. Is that what you see?
Well, that's absolutely the case. By definition, the SRA cannot be in a city limits. So anything that's a city limits is automatically out of the SRA, therefore cannot be a treatable area for the VTP.
Okay, so that limits that. Okay, well, thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate this.
No problem. Any other questions for Marin Map?
Thank you, Barbara.
And since you might have to feel free to speak up because we can only see like 6 people at a time if you're trying to raise your hand. But if we're ready to move on to the story map, I'll do the story map. If you go to our website and hit programs, you'll see the Community Wildfire Protection Plan story map. It'll bring you to this. I'm working with Sonoma Technologies to have a direct link to the hazard assessment, the partial level hazard assessment. But as of now, they every link they give me takes you right to this home page. And here you see just the broad outline of certain sections of each section of the CWPP, but not the full listing of it, or not the full literature of it. You can click by these little buttons on the left. If you see where I'm on the left and hitting the little radial buttons, it'll take you from each category. Unfortunately, and the reason why I'm walking you through this is that the piece that most people are probably want to see is the treatable landscape, and it's the very last toggle. So if you hit this 30, and then you have to go to this final piece down here, and you can, excuse me, scroll up. I went too far. There we go. Parcel level assessment. It's right there. It's page number 29 out of 30. And it takes a little while for it to load up on here. And that was one of the reasons why we asked for it to be on Marin Map. And I do want to give a shout out to Marin Map. They have been great partners through this and very eager to support us. And one of my intentions is to ask them when we start doing projects that we can start showing our projects onto the Marin Map as well. And I think due to the way Zoom shares things, I'm not sure you're going to be able to see the treatable lands, the parcel level hazard assessment the way we want it to. And again, that was why we went the Marin Map to be able to put that in there. So any questions? And I see Director McEntee.
Sashi, yeah.
Oh, now it came up.
Just a quick clarification. Does MWPA have to pay for Marin Maps, or are we able to access it through the members?
We've been accessing through the member agencies, since every one of our agencies is a member.
Great, thank you.
Great question. I'm seeing no other hands up, Mark.
All right, and that was the end of my.
One more.
I'm sorry, Kath.
I'm just thinking that this is a great thing for the communications committee, because everyone needs to see this. Everyone needs to see these maps and where all our fire threat is and everything. And I'm at a, as you know, because I'm on the communication committee, that I think more information is better information. So I would say thank you for all of this and continue to put this out there.
Yeah, and you're right. We really do need to make this part of our strategic communications.
Wonderful. So Mark, is this the end of your report? Or
That is the end of my report, and open to any questions on any other portion.
So any questions from the board on Mark's report? I'm seeing none. Mark, you asked a question of us as regarding the NIST report on the campfire in Paradise. Should you send it out? And I would say, please send that link out. I took a look at it, and Mark's conclusion for board members, again, was that the work that we're doing is spot on. We're focusing on the right things and the right priority. That's what this report tells a Paradise story. And I encourage all of you to take a quick look at it. It's really an astounding assessment and an affirmation, and maybe a bit of a roadmap for us. And I see Gabe.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Mark, this may be a little bit in the weeds, but to what extent are those maps useful to the Zonehaven project? Is there enough resolution there? Is the format correct? Is there any carryover of any value in all the mapping we've done?
Absolutely, and in fact, we are having Zonehaven connect with Marin Map as well as several other of our data sources. And now I'm not a GIS expert, but I've heard that Marin Map is like the model that everybody should follow when it comes to the quality of the maps and alignment with other GIS products. So I think we're in good shape.
Okay, and just one follow-up question. Once it's integrated on their platform, that means that citizens as well as agencies should have more access, right, on a whole variety of devices like mobile and whatever.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Gabe. Directors, any other questions of Executive Officer Brown? Seeing none, let's move to public comment, please. Allison, any public comment on Mark's report?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members, and there's no public comment.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Allison. Bring this back to the board for any further discussion. I'm seeing none. Thanks, Mark. Really excellent report. We look forward to continuing to hear from you. So let's move to item 6. This is the consent calendar. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on the consent calendar items that will occur prior to the board's discussion. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action, or as an alternative, items on this calendar may be removed by any board member or staff for separate discussion to vote. So first of all, public comment. Any public comment about this item?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members, and there's no public comment.
Okay, let's move to the board. Any board members wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? And I am seeing head shaking, no. Excellent.
This is Catherine. I'm sorry, I have my hand up. Yeah.
Oh, hi, Catherine. I'm sorry, missed you.
I don't want to pull anything, but I want to also underscore the comment that was made by the public about the format of the minutes. It's, you know, very good repeat of the structure, but not the substance. And I don't think it needs a lot of wording at all, but just 1 or 2 sentences each about the gist of what was being discussed would really be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Megan, I don't know if, you know, the board made a decision to move to action minutes and to streamline, you know, the level of narrative associated with our discussions. So, you know, as Catherine suggested, it's something I think, you know, whatever and whenever is appropriate, but we did move to action minutes. So I think perhaps we could just take this up and resolve it to the public's satisfaction.
Yeah, I would have to look back at the action that was taken, whether it was a formal motion and whether we'd need to revisit it that way. If it was just done by consensus, then we could seek that next time around. So we could put that on the next agenda if that would be helpful. Okay, it was a matter of record. It was Director McEntee who suggested this in the executive committee months ago. So that's, I think, where you can find it. Let's see, I saw Julie Millen's hand up and then Director Kohler second.
Thank you, Bruce. I don't want to pull anything, but I did want to make a note for everyone to take a look at the excellent board retreat summary, because that's not an action item minute at all. It's very detailed and there's lots of rich material in there that I think if people need to take a look at that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. Barbara, please.
Yeah, I just want to sort of echo what was said by a member of the public, and Catherine is, I know the discussion when we made that decision, and I personally didn't really care for it. I know there was some idea that potentially we might save a little money. I think for most people reading those minutes, I think the discussion was that people could look at the videos. I think that's asking a lot of folks. Yep. And I think if we do add a little bit just to make it more clear, I know when I read the minutes, it gives me a really good sense. It doesn't as much now, but usually minutes give me a good sense of what happened at those meetings. So if we could beef that up on another agenda, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'm hearing, and I'm seeing heads shaking. So this is an issue that we will address and resolve. I see any other board members. So I see that if no items are pulled, so I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move we approve the consent calendar.
Second. You can have it.
Motion and second. Roll call.
Salinas Fire District.
Aye.
City of Mill Valley.
Aye.
City of San Rafael.
Aye.
City of Larkspur.
Aye.
County of Marin.
Aye.
Inverness Fire District.
Aye.
Muir Beach Community Services District.
Aye.
Novato Fire District.
Aye.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District.
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District.
Aye.
Vincent Beach Fire District.
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera.
Aye.
Town of Fairfax.
Aye.
Town of Ross.
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, board. Let's move on to item number 7, which is where Executive Officer Brown is going to provide us a staff report on the Remy Moose and Manley memo and the draft environmental consultant request for proposals. So we also have, I believe we have Sabrina. There's Sabrina. Hi, Sabrina. We have Sabrina Teller with Remy Moose and Manley here available to answer any questions. So Mark, please.
Absolutely. And I figure we could take this with 2 stabs, if you are good with that, in regards to Q&A. Allow some questions to go to Sabrina and Megan regarding the memo. And then when we start discussing it, go from there and discuss the RFP instead of combining the 2. But I did want to say, we tabled the development of our RFP back in October, and in order to explore issues and items more with greater depth with Remy Moose Manley. And here we are now with our RFP. And I think strongly that the time and the resources that we put into it was well worth it. And we have a very strong RFP because of that time. And so with that, I'll pass it off to Sabrina. And if you want to give just a quick high-level overview of the memo and just entertain any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mark. Sabrina.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I won't go into the gory details of the memo because it is quite long, 23 pages, but I wanted to say I welcomed the chance to sort of further think hard about some of the issues that the board had framed for me in my previous memo. And in this memo, I tried to drill down a little deeper on some of the questions that seem to be of continuing interest to the directors, including the use of the categorical exemption, the class 4 categorical exemption, and how that interacts with the concept of defensible space, the ministerial exemption, where that might be applicable in certain jurisdictions that have ordinances that could support the use of it. And then there was a lot of interest also in the use of the emergency exemption. And, I'll apologize for sort of the length of detail of the legal discussion of that one, but it is, the case law on it is quite nuanced. And, hopefully what you take from it is that it is a potentially useful exemption, but perhaps not as useful as people might hope it to be for your circumstances. But that said, there may be some limited circumstances that I would be happy to answer questions about using it here. It is more intended for things that can be predicted to occur more certainly, even if the timing is a little bit uncertain, and less applicable to things that are characterized as sort of ongoing conditions. And so hopefully that was made clear by the memo, but again, it's a nuanced topic. And so I'm happy to answer further questions about that. And then there were some questions also just about various CEQA topics of cumulative impacts and what constitutes reasonable foreseeability and piecemealing and all those great fun terms in CEQA. So with that, if there are specific questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Sabrina. So board, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions of Sabrina for further clarification. This is actually one of 2 memos that RMM has provided us, really in depth. And, thank you, Sabrina, for your, excellent work. So board members, questions, clarifying questions. So first, Tom Finn and Sashi after Tom.
Hi, just kind of a hyper-technical question. The staff memo mentions the request that the consultant offer the same fee schedule to member agencies to create consistency in environmental compliance and to decrease the workload of those agencies. Yet the form agreement in paragraph 15 says that there's no third-party beneficiaries to our agreement. Doesn't that make the member agencies a third-party beneficiary to our agreement if they get the benefit of the fee schedule that we're getting? Not that I care about it, but I just want to be sure that we're not entangling ourselves in some way where the towns will complain, or the member agencies, sorry, might complain that they didn't get the rates that we got.
So just for point of clarification, Tom, thank you for your question. Executive Officer Brown had suggested that we break this discussion into 2 different discussions. One is the RMM menu, and then secondly, memo, and then secondly is the RFP. We are jumping ahead a little bit, but is that a question of Sabrina or is that a question of Mark? Do we want to?
I would assume, Sabrina, it's not critical, but it is mentioned in the memo. So I thought
thank you, Tom.
It's a, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for making me clear on your question. So Sabrina.
I'm a little bit confused because I don't think it pertains to my memo. I think it might be somebody else's memo.
Yeah, it's related to the RFP itself, which does ask that the consultants consider offering the same rates to the member agencies, but those would be through separate contracts. And so I hadn't seen the conflict with the third-party beneficiary section, but I will re-examine that. And the professional services agreement is a form agreement that we've just attached. So there will be other terms that may end up being negotiated. So that may not ultimately be the final agreement. It's just attached to the RFP so that they'll have a sense of where we're going with the agreement. And when we ultimately get a consultant on board and have negotiated that agreement, we'll bring it back to the board for consideration at that time. So thank you for raising that issue. I don't see it as an issue that we need to deal with at this point, but it may come up before the final agreement.
Thanks all. Thanks, Megan. So back to the board questions. Let's see, Sasha, you had your hand up, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Sabrina, thank you so much for putting this together. This is a complicated topic that I've gotten to know a lot more about than I ever expected to over the last year. So I have several questions, and I don't know if you want me to kind of throw them all out to you at once, but I'll just start with, in our packet is a letter from the Fern Group asking about whether or not their understanding was that that MWPA should be the lead agency on any project that we provide the majority of funding for. My understanding is that the lead agency is the agency that is doing the work, regardless of who's funding it. So I wanted to get clarification on that.
You want to take one at a time, Sasha?
Can we just do one at a time? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go.
I'm afraid I'll lose track if I get too many, but I'm taking notes.
Go easy on us, Sasha, please.
Okay, yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so on the lead agency question, the issue of lead agency is generally, it defaults to the agency that will be the first to act, or that has primary responsibility for implementing or carrying out the project. It can be the one in whose jurisdiction it's occurring. There's kind of layers of factors that you could use to determine who is the lead agency. And there's not always a black and white test, but just the fact that the MWPA is funding it does not mean that it necessarily is the lead agency. If it's funding and implementing, and some other layers of involvement, then there could be an argument for being lead agency, but generally it's going to be the agency who's doing the work and or responsible for carrying it out.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point to clarify for the members of the public, and particularly for the Fern Group who asked the question. The second question I have is on the ministerial exemption. My understanding of what constitutes a project under CEQA is that there is a physical alteration involved, a physical alteration of the environment involved, and that it's discretionary, meaning that you can choose how you want to do it. If it's not discretionary, then it's ministerial, and therefore it would be exempt. Is that a correct understanding of that distinction there? Okay, so we can't just use ministerial, it has to be something where there would be no discretion on how we're gonna do it. Okay.
Yeah, the typical example of ministerial is something like a building permit where you're comparing it only to objective standards. And if the thing meets the standards, the building official or whomever cannot say no to issuing the permit.
Okay. And then my last question is regarding the Category 4 exemption, which I know several people have pointed out lists examples are, could be, but are not limited to. And then we have this 30 to 100 foot that you can do defensible space work without a CEQA, being exempt from CEQA. If it's an extra hazardous condition, and you point out in your memo that it's not really defined, what that means. My understanding from talking with the legislative staff is that you could, by ordinance, that any of the members could, by ordinance, define what they mean by extra hazardous condition, and that could be something that maybe within 100 feet of a structure, or it could be outside of that. For example, I know there are some projects that some agencies are looking at that are beyond the 100 feet, but they're warranted because of the vegetative fuel load and the topography. So I guess to go back to the question, is it your understanding that that's something that could be modified by ordinance and still within the category 4 exemption? Or would that ordinance itself have to go through the CEQA process in order to?
Well, let's answer first whether you could exceed the 100 feet. The 100 foot and the extra hazardous condition is given as an exemplar in the CADEX. You know, so it includes the language, you know, such as, but not limited to. And so arguably you could apply the CADEX to something that is enough like those examples and that meets all of the preamble criteria of the categorical exemption itself, where you're not removing mature scenic trees, et cetera. So you always, for any type of project, if you're applying that CADEX, you have to meet the preamble language of the CADEX. And then you look and say, do I also fit any of those examples? You know, in which case, then, you know, clearly you do fit in that exemption, but they are not limited. They don't limit the scope. That said, you know, they give a, you know, it's rare. I think that you would routinely apply the CADEX outside of the 100 feet without developing a very strong record for how the agency interprets that CADEX to still apply beyond the 100 feet. How is it defining extra hazardous, because it's not defined elsewhere that we could find. I think the example or the suggestion of adopting an ordinance is probably a good one. You know, I had thought because there's not an example, agencies could kind of come up with their own definition of extra hazardous, you know, make some determinations on a record of some sort and either apply it on a case-by-case basis to projects as they come along. And maybe you have a set of criteria that to you means extra hazardous, and, you know, the agency decision makers are generally in agreement on what that means. And then as projects come along, then your staff are making determinations about whether those projects meet that extra hazardous set of conditions, and therefore that the CADEX could apply. I think an ordinance is a good idea in that it makes it even more explicit. You know, it's subject to a public process of adopting it. Everybody has a chance to weigh in on the proposed meaning of the extra hazardous or what factors you're considering. I don't think that's the only way to do it, but I think it is a good way to do it if you want to undertake that more formal process. I'm forgetting what the last part of your question was. And whether the ordinance would have to go through CEQA. Yeah. Arguably, yes. You know, in that it is an action that could foreseeably result in physical changes on the environment. That said, if you're just adopting a set of definitions and then, you know, you're setting up a process by which projects will be assessed against that set of conditions. You know, I haven't thought too deeply about it yet, but there might be an argument that ordinance itself is not a project under CEQA, but I would need to give that a little bit more thought before giving you a really definitive answer on it. Okay. Because I think people who might be concerned about doing that could probably come up with arguments to say that CEQA does apply to it.
Yep, thank you. That is really, really helpful. And I'll just have one final thought, which is there are two 100 feet that I think I'm often hearing get confused as people talk about these things. There, as a parcel owner, you're required to, and you're within the WUI, you're required to take care of the 100 feet surrounding your parcel. And then there is the 100 feet of defensible space around a structure that is exempt from CEQA. And those are two different 100 feet. So just, you know, just wanted to validate my understanding on that. Often when you hear 100 feet, you know, we're the kind of projects we're going to be doing as WPA, they're going to be defensible space projects, and they're going to be projects that are not around a structure that are, you know, preventing ember generation sources from developing, like ridgetop fuel breaks, shaded fuel breaks.
Right. Yeah, we do always have to be mindful, you know, and look carefully at the definitions and the things that are the provisions that you're proposing to apply to make sure we're using them correctly. So hopefully I didn't mix those up in my memo, but no, I just wanted to make sure that my understanding was correct and that was, you know, something that the public would hear, because I know that these things are thrown around and it's difficult to follow all this stuff. Right. So, and then as I noted in my memo, the Novato Fire District Ordinance has set up an ordinance where it appears to create a ministerial process for requiring the removal up to 150 feet from structure. So that would be an example where it's farther apart from the 100-foot given in the CADEX example.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks for your patience and letting me ask all these questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Sashi. Thank you, Sabrina. Other board members, any other questions for Sabrina on the RMM memo? I am seeing, Sabrina, thank you so much. Let's take this out to the public for comment. Allison, please.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, and bring this back to the board for discussion and a motion to authorize me to sign. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. To the board, authorize issuance of the request for proposals. We have not talked about the request for proposals. So let's, Mark, please, will you please move on and to item 7B, I guess.
Yeah, let's call it 7B. That works for me. The request for proposals. And again, I think that the time that we spent entertaining our questions with Remy Moose Manley was well spent. And I also wanted to thank the Environmental Ad Hoc Committee, Subcommittee. The input was phenomenal. And then the Executive Committee had great feedback as well. So the basis of our RFP, we stayed with our original draft RFP as the total framework. And then we pretty much scrapped the entire scope of work from the old RFP and used a successful RFP that was provided to us by Remy Moose Manley that Santa Clara County Open Space used. And they were very happy with the results from that RFP. And with the help from the ad hoc subcommittee and the executive committee, I think we got the scope down to right where we need it to be. Instead of reading, I won't be reading you the whole RFP. I just want to give you the highlights of a couple of the scope items I think that are important to discuss. If you approve, we'll open it on the 22nd of this month. It would close on the 31st of March, and we would look at selections in April and May. And Santa Clara County Open Space did provide their spreadsheet that they use as a decision-making tool, and I think it will be a good basis for us. And as Director Finn pointed out, we did put in a stipulation to provide like services for and fees for our member agencies, and that's to create consistency across all the MWPA-funded projects and also the workload benefits. Our member agencies are starting to struggle a little bit with being able to get the work done with this infusion of money. And we see this as a way to offload some of that work, and they can build it into the project costs. We were looking for someone with experience with CEQA, the CalVTP, and NEPA. They would be available to the staff, board, committees, and meetings of the MWPA. They would file with the county clerk, state clearinghouse, or whatever location we need to file with, and then provide us with hard and soft copies. And they would take care of all the appropriate levels of documentation. They would help to create content and support public meetings regarding compliance. And they're also going to provide us an annual analysis of time and resources for compliance effort. And we think that this will help give us data to determine the need for a programmatic EIR. They will help provide surveys and monitoring as required by CEQA, CalVTP, and NEPA, give us regulatory support for Coastal Commission, the Bay Conservation Development Commission, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, et cetera. And then they would advise on the need if we need to go into an EIR, but we did not include the development of an EIR into that scope. And so with that, I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Mark. So I see Barbara, please. Barbara Kohler, question.
Yeah, and thank you for incorporating a lot of the things I'd asked for. Just a question, I'm not sure if it needs to be in the RFP, but you have to file with Department of Fish and Wildlife fees when you file. So is there anywhere in this RFP where they would prepare, do we need to add something about them letting us know what the fees are or something of that nature? It depends what the document is, what the fees are, and the fees kind of change every year. Sorry, I thought I turned my phone off.
Oh, no worries. And that's just always a reminder for the rest of us to check our phone, right?
Yeah.
I've done that for sure. And My assumption, and I'll lean on Megan for this, is that it would be part of the project cost that we would include with the project cost. But Megan, your thoughts?
Yeah.
That was mine as well. And I think this will be because it's an on-call consultant, there will be variability depending on the scope of the projects that they're focusing on at the time. So I think that will just come up in our discussions with them as they're going project to project.
Thank you, Megan. Other directors' comments? Looks like not. Let's take comments from the public on this item, please, on the RFP.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment. Okay, so let's bring it back to the board for discussion and a motion to authorize the issuance of the RFP for an environmental consultant. Do we have a motion discussion or ready for a motion?
There's no discussion, President Goins. I would make a motion. Thank you,
Steve Berto. Second.
Second.
I see Catherine holding her hand and Barbara. So thank you. We have a motion and a second. Megan, can we need a roll call on this or? Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. Allison, roll call, please.
Salinas Fire District.
Aye.
City of Mill Valley.
Aye.
City of San Rafael.
Aye.
City of Larkspur.
Aye.
County of Marin.
Aye.
Inverness Fire District. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Inverness Fire District.
Aye.
Thank you. Muir Beach Community Services District.
Aye.
Nevada Fire District.
Aye.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District.
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District.
Aye.
Stinson Beach Fire District.
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera.
Aye.
Town of Fairfax.
Aye.
Town of Ross.
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Allison. And if we may, just for a moment, Sabrina, you're still with us. Going back to item 7A, which is the RMM the memo. There've been some questions asked about. So we have the map of Marin that shows the state responsibility area. We have the map of Marin that shows the treated area. We have the areas that are local responsibility area, and there have been several questions raised about the applicability, the practical applicability of the Cal VTP to projects outside of the state responsibility area. So Sabrina, would you please provide us with some clarification on the applicability of the analytical process that you would go through with the Cal VTP to local responsibility areas? And you advised us in your first memo, so I hate to go back, but I think it's important that we're clear as to how these things might connect when we get our project manager in to help us with environmental compliance.
Sure. So you would not necessarily be able to make the kind of clean point A to point B within the scope finding, directly tiering from the Cal VTP EIR unless your project is within the treatable landscape of the state responsibility area, because that was those were the bubbles that were considered within the EIR. That's the footprint of the impact that we were considering in that document. But that document is a wealth of useful information. And because of the proximity of the landscape being analyzed and the depth of detail in that document and the types of activities that are very similar to yours or the same, your own analysis could probably incorporate by reference quite a lot of the Cal VTP. You could expressly rely on it. You could incorporate it by reference. You could cut and paste. There's any number of options you could use to use a lot of that good information for your own purposes. You just would not be able to do the kind of streamlining program to project specific analysis and therefore be able just to file an NOD at the end of that and be on your way. You might need to pull that into your own, say, mitigated neg deck or EIR. But you just wouldn't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel as to that whole list of impacts and all of the technical analysis. You could incorporate by reference quite a lot of that, I would expect.
So you're saying that that which is relevant within the Cal VTP EIR could be incorporated by reference. You could have a project that spans two boundaries. One is in the SRA, one is on the LRA, and it makes no sense not to do one unified analysis on landscapes that are indeed, all intermixed. So I just, we may need some future advice on that, and we may want to let Mark decide if we want, and Megan to decide if we want to pursue further clarification. But I think it's important for folks to understand the relevance of the Cal VTP EIR to the non-SRA areas. Anyway, I just want to go ahead.
If I could make one further point of clarification, the Cal VTP EIR contemplates that, for majority of the times that you're using it, you're probably making a within the scope determination, and you're filling out this project specific analysis checklist, which is itself quite a lot of analysis, and then you're filing your NOD. But that checklist approach has off-ramps in it for if you can't make a determination that your project is entirely within the scope, and so one way you might use it is you might start off using that checklist, and then you might tick the box for which off-ramp you get diverted onto. And then it's expressly clear that you're using some of that Cal VTP, but then you're doing additional analysis or more site-specific analysis for the portions of the project that are outside the treatable landscape of the SRA. So that might be one way that you might use that tool.
Superb. Thank you for your clarification, Sabrina. Mm-hmm. Thanks for allowing me to ask that question.
Sure.
Let's see, I think we're ready to move on to item number 8, which is the grand jury report. Mark, will you please give us a staff report?
Absolutely. I'll be very brief because it was such a short staff report, and I think you all had an opportunity to digest it. It's the roadblocks to safer evacuation. I do feel, and as do all the people I've talked to this about, that there's many valid points in there. However, I think we started making progress towards what the grand jury report wanted to see prior to the report being issued. And the two examples would be the implementation of Zonehaven. We started that process in September, October, and then our ingress egress study is going to really help the countywide coordination. So I entertain any questions based on our letter. I felt the less was more, I took the less is more route on the letter.
Thank you, Mark. Any question from the board on this item? And I am seeing Director Berto. Steve, yes.
Yeah, I guess this is more question for Megan, because I thought the response was fine, and I agree, being concise and to the point in response to their questions is the way to go. But I guess I would ask our council here, do you feel that the questions have been adequately answered and we would satisfy what the grand jury is looking for?
Excellent.
Yes, I do. I was given a chance to review it in draft form, and then as it's come closer to final, and I absolutely do. And it's consistent with how other jurisdictions have responded, not necessarily to this report, but to others that are similar. So I feel confident in that.
Perfect. Thank you. Great job, guys.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Megan. Directors, any other questions? And I am seeing none. Let's move to the public. Allison?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Thanks, Allison. So I'll bring this back to the board for discussion and a motion to authorize me to sign the proposal to the 2019-2020 Marin Grand Jury report and to forward it to the presiding judge of the Marin County Superior Court. Any discussion? I see Dennis, please.
Yeah, Bruce, I'm very supportive of the letter, but I wanted to comment about some of the interactions that maybe the grand jury who's listening didn't quite understand. And I think it's important to, is there's the actual event, the actual evacuation that's handled by basically sheriff and fire, mostly sheriff, and police. And then there's the preparation for the event, which certainly we have a role in. But I think it's important the public sort of separate those two items when they're thinking about holistic approach. The other thing I commented to the grand jury when I did get interviewed about this, and I think it's really important for, again, the public and for us to understand, is the majority of the problems on small roads are actually not owned by the public agencies. They're mostly private associations, private driveways that have multiple residents, and we may or may not be able to address those issues, but we're certainly in a position to address the public roadways and the bottlenecks that occur there. And I think that it's just important that when you're talking about one agency having responsibility, it's a real complex issue. And I just wanted to make that statement for the public.
Thank you, Dennis, for that clarifying information, and very important. Other members' discussion? So we're looking for a motion.
So moved.
I see Mark White and Simpson Beach, motion. Second.
Second.
Barbara Kohler, second. Motion second to authorize forwarding this response, signature and forwarding. Roll call, please.
Salinas Fire District.
Aye.
City of Mill Valley.
Aye.
City of San Rafael.
Aye.
City of Larkspur.
Aye.
County of Marin.
Aye.
Inverness Fire District.
Aye.
Muir Beach Community Services District.
Aye.
Novato Fire District.
Aye.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District.
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District.
Aye.
Stinson Beach Fire District.
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera.
Aye.
Town of Fairfax.
Aye.
Town of Ross.
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thanks. Thanks, Allison. Thanks all. Let's move to item number 9, committee reports, operations committee report update. Mark, you going to handle these for us?
No, I brought in the chairs for the operations committee,
okay.
Advisory Technical Committee, and Rich is here as well for Fire Safe Marin. Okay,
so we're looking to Chief Tyler then, are we, for operations?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Tyler.
Thank you, President Goins and board members. So my name is Bill Tyler. I'm the Fire Chief of the Nevada Fire District, and I'm the new chair of the Ops Committee for MWPA. And Larkspur City Manager Dan Schwartz is the co-chair. Took over for Jason in January. I was able to attend the retreat of the board, which I enjoyed very much, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to that. The Ops Committee really has 2 responsibilities. One is to come up with a work plan for recommendation for your acceptance, and also a budget that then supports that body of work. We have recently formed 2 new ad hoc committees, one on the actual work plan itself and the other on the budget. So those are both in play. Since January, we were able to stand up the Advisory Technical Committee and also support them through a number of meetings. I've met and discussed with the chairs of that committee, Ruben Martin, and also Lynn Osgood, kind of what some expectations and timeframes are. I'll go over those with you in a minute. With regards to our existing work plan, we're receiving updates so that we can discuss those and report back out. We've received 11 of 17 agencies to date. Our next ops meeting is on February 25th, next Thursday, and we anticipate reporting out at that time on all 17. With regards to the 21-22 work plan that's in development, we are using a vision for that plan as fire adaptive communities. Our approach is house out. And our focus is going to be working together within the zone. So rather than working independently as 17 different agencies, working within those zones to come up with the best plans that will benefit everyone. The timeframes that we're working on right now, January and February was the Advisory Technical Committee getting together. Many of those agencies have met in their zones, are talking about shared work that can be done, efficient, effective use of the funds, putting projects together so there's mutual benefit and mutual program management where it's possible. So that is a main focus of this, that we're shifting into that mindset. In March, we expect a substantial list of projects and programs to start coming forward. We'll probably have a series of meetings where we can review and look at those. Sometimes what happens in one zone, they may come up with some very good ideas about particular projects or programs that they can share, and other areas may want to adopt something similar. So it's sort of a melting pot of ideas, best practices, thoughts going forward. So that'll all occur in March and probably a portion of April. We're hoping to have a draft, the first draft sort of pulled together of what the plan might look like by the end of April. We would then be bringing some version forward of that to the full board sometime in May to take a look at and receive further comment back on. And then we would bring it back, make final improvements to it, and then bring it back to the full board in June for final acceptance and funding. Right now, the Ops Committee is receiving updates on the evacuation study RFP that's being done. We're heavily involved with that project. We've also supported and participated in the kickoff meeting for Zonehaven, the team formations with all the stakeholders by zone. And our first step is setting up those zones and then populating the information. Some of that work that's going to be done under Zonehaven will then further inform the evacuation study. So that's an important next step. Again, we're going to be meeting on Thursday, February 25th at 3 p.m. If you're interested in attending on Zoom, it'll be posted to the website. And during that meeting, we also will be discussing project and program management. So this is important that agencies get a good feel for how we're going to get all of this work done. Not every agency is doing it the same way. And so we need to talk about how we're doing it. You know, are we doing it, some of the work through consultants? Is this full-time limited term positions? Are these, is it a portion of an employee's job that they're taking on? So we're going to share and try and come up with recommendations on how to move forward with that. There's a lot of work that needs to get done and we need to be efficient. We could not do it on our own. We're going to have to bring in people to help us do it. And we want to do that in a cost-effective way that makes sure that the taxpayers' money is paid for efficiently without taking on unfunded liabilities. We're also going to have a presentation from CAL FIRE Unit Chief Kurt McCrae from the Humboldt Del Norte unit on air curtain burners. What those are it's a fuel reduction device. It's highly effective alternative to traditional wood waste recycling. It produces a highly clean burn at a fraction of the economic environmental cost. It simulates natural burning without the high degree of pollution at a lower cost. So there's been some interest in that. A lot of times you see these devices being used at large sort of timber projects. And so there's some concern that, maybe we don't need something like that because we won't have the volume of material to do that. But it is something that we want to look at and get informed about. And then we're also going to have a presentation from Todd Landau on a software application that can be used by our defensible space evaluators and our home evaluations. It's a very interactive application that ties the evaluations into other support resources for the public. It's very pleasing to look at, very simple to use. And so we want to explore whether that would be a standardized approach to all of our evaluations and a tool that we could use for the public. Let's see, and that's it. So if you have any questions for me, that's where we're sitting today.
Thank you, Bill. Excellent report. So much work going on, so much real on the horizon. Wonderful summary. Are there any questions from the board on this? I see Sashi and Catherine Hilliard, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chief Tyler. I really appreciate that the Ops Committee is taking a sort of a principled approach of, starting with the fire adaptive community vision and sort of going from the house out. So does that mean that for this round, you're going to be focusing on house out type projects versus ember reduction, fuel reduction kinds of things like shaded fuel breaks, that type of thing?
Shaded fuel breaks can work within that approach, but we want to make sure that every zone has funding available for people for home hardening, incentivizing home hardening projects, that they have incentivized grant funding for defensible space work. And then, again, that's then moving from the house out. The next is into the neighborhood, support for all the Firewise communities, doing projects within neighborhoods and around. Some of those might include to where homes and subdivisions abut into open space, and that's where you might see a shaded fuel break project. So again, moving out towards, and and then also a lot of focus on evacuation routes because that's so critical. But I think what you won't see is a lot of projects that are far out into the open space areas, ridgeline stuff. All of that is kind of out of scope, if you will, for now. And most of these projects we want to do within categorically exempt environmental, projects with proper evaluations and documentation. But most of it's within that 100-foot, and then shaded fuel breaks out from there when it is necessary.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Sashi. Catherine Hilliard, please.
Hi, Chief Tyler. So this is a more general question. You have all of the members of our 17 agencies, experts on your ops committee or representatives. Are there things that we can tell the public now that are already being done by the individual agencies that are in the mission of this MWPA, so that we can say something other than process, that we actually are doing things and getting like a report back to the public of what's already underway?
Wonderful question.
Yeah, we can do that. What we've been trying to do is work with the executive director, and as they stand up the rest of their team, is we want to get a, built into the website, a very easy to use, sort of a one-stop glance at all of the projects with the process and progress that they've made, with specific documentation, photos, scope, etc., where they can go to one place and do that. In the interim, we could try and put together some sort of a report that gets posted. We don't have a format for that currently, but that is something that we could try and do before the website gets set up. But I'll let Mark talk about the timing there.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Mark, were you going to respond to that?
I was just going to say that the development of the website is part of the Strategic Communications Ad Hoc Subcommittee's task to start working on that. And we can take a look at the report that we put together, I think in November, that listed all of our projects on about 2 pages, and we can retune that up and deliver to the board. And that would provide a document for everyone to share with their constituency.
So yeah, Catherine, I just want to just thank you. Excellent question, and Chief, excellent response. That we do have a communication subcommittee that is working. I would really request that they take your question, incorporate it into the work that they do, and we come up with a cohesive communication strategy. So thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Mark. Let's see, the next, I see Barbara Kohler, and I think Catherine and Inverness's hand was up. So Barbara, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Tyler. I'm not sure if this question is for you as the Ops Committee, but who is taking on the idea of putting together the grants for low-income disadvantaged communities? Is that something you guys are at least doing the framework for, and maybe the new project manager for MWPA would actually putting together the logistics? Do you know how that's going to work?
So my understanding is that when Jason was chair, they did put forward a proposal on the grants management, and I think that's the last time Ops handled that. But if the board directs us to revisit that, we certainly would.
Well, I will just say that at the time that Jason was chair, I had asked about grants and some specific types, and he had responded to me that because it was the first year, you're going to wait till year 2 to put the grants together, and maybe Mark can weigh in on this, but to me, I think that's what we committed to, is having grants rolled out for year 2. So Mark, maybe you can provide some feedback.
Absolutely. And I would like to see 2 different types of grants proposed in the core budget, and it would be the operations committee to be able to identify the appropriate dollar carve out of the core budget right off the top, and then start developing the projects below that. And then it would be the planning and program manager within the MWPA that would manage the outflow of those grants.
Okay. Good question. So I was just going to add one thing is maybe I can follow up with Mark subsequently to provide some feedback, because I think there are different kinds of grants, not just to individuals, which I think is part of our jurisdiction, but maybe to some nonprofits who have low income housing, where we could help them with home hardening or other things that particularly I'm thinking of something in West Marin. But anyway, I can follow up with Mark offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Wonderful question. Thanks for bringing that back up to us. Thank you. And Mark, we're going to need to do some ad hoc work on that.
And President Goings, if I can just add one other thing on the grants, you know, whoever is going to be coordinating the grants, there's a tremendous amount of grants that are out there right now that will be coming from the state, also that we'll want to try and take advantage of to maximize the work that we can get done with matching fundings, et cetera. And so that will be a piece of that as well.
And we are exploring those grants that are available to public agencies that aren't necessarily available to private individuals. And the idea would be we would take in that grant as a public agency and then turn around and offer it to the individuals.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you much, Mark. Thank you so much. Other directors' questions? Did I see another hand up?
Director Kimball.
Director Kimball. Hi, David.
Hi, thank you. Barbara's question caused me to, this may be premature, it may be too close to the ground, and if it is, we can move on. But something I've been wondering about for quite some time, thinking of defensible space and the grants for folks that are don't have the financial resources to proceed. And I'm wondering if, Bill, the ops committee or anybody else is thinking about at some point, do we organize teams of approved contractors, AmeriCorps teams, something of that ilk that can be deployed? Because I look at our community and many, and we'll have people that won't have the financial means, and they also won't have the means to even know who to go to for the defensible space work. And I don't know that whose agenda that is on, but, and maybe this is premature, but I'm wondering if you all have given any thought to that, or will be giving any thought to it.
Yeah, I think, San Rafael Fire has done a tremendous amount of work with the volunteer AmeriCorps groups. That might be a good model. There's also been some discussions at the chief's level about fuels crews, standing up fuels crews that we can train and equip and direct to do the work, so that we're not competing necessarily with the limited resources, or, if too many of the contractors are taken, that we can move these fuels crews and put them on projects, at will. We control the schedule and be able to do that. So that you'll likely see some discussion about that going forward. These are not fire crews. These are fuels crews doing fuel reduction work.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Thank you, Bill. Any other questions of Chief Tyler? Seeing none, really wonderful discussion and more work to do. Duly noted by our Executive Officer, Mark Brown. Let's move on to the ATC update, please. Advisory Technical Committee.
Good afternoon, Director Goings and members of the board. This is Ruben Martin, Fire Chief with the Central Marin Fire Department. I am your chair for the Advisory Technical Committee. So we've actually had 2 meetings since the inception of the MWPA. Our first meeting was in December. It was basically an introduction for every member of the ACT committee to come together. And one, we needed to appoint a chair for the committee and a vice chair, and then start coming up with our bylaws. We since then have appointed myself as your chair for the ACT committee, and Lynn Osgood, Deputy Fire Marshal with the Nevada Fire Protection District, as the vice chair. With the bylaws were created during the Christmas break. We met again in, what was it, February 4th, where we presented the bylaws to the committee, in which we voted on and approved them, which I believe Director Brown may bring those forward to you for approval at the board at a future date. The goal of the ACT committee is to provide a technical expertise, so to speak, to the operations committee based on any project that is being brought forward within the work plan. What we decided to do at the direction of the operations committee, instead of, similar to what Chief Tyler had mentioned, instead of trying to compete for core dollars amongst the 17 individual agencies that make up the MWPA, we decided to come together to start working within each of the 5 operational areas. Nice. For example, Nevada works with Nevada City and the County of Marin. Here within the Central Marin, Greater Ross Valley area, we are working with all the agencies from Fairfax, Sleepy Hollow, San Selmo, Ross, Kentfield, Larkspur, and Corte Madera. And the goal behind that is for us to try to concentrate our dollars and to try to become the most effective and efficient that we possibly can by trying to identify work areas within each op area and to try to see how we can maximize our efforts. With that said, we also were given the direction that if any of our operational areas border a neighboring operational area, for example, here within the Central Ross Valley area, we border against areas of Terra Linda and San Rafael, and then also to the south with the Southern Marin operational area. So any projects that line up within those areas, our goals are to work with each other to try to maximize the amount of work that's being done that makes our budget get stretched out to become the most effective that we possibly can. We've also been tasked with revamping our work plan application, so to speak. And we're going to break them up similar to what Chief Brown had mentioned was we're going to break them up into core dollar funding, and then your other 2 are your local mitigation dollars and your defensible space bucket. Those 2 are going to come to you as an advisory of what we're doing. So that way MWPA understands what your local agencies are doing at the local level. And at the same time, at the core dollars come to you with a core project using that fire adaptive community approach with the house out and identifying your evacuation routes. One of the directions that we're going to try to do to maximize this year is try to identify and clear up a lot of the vegetation along our primary and secondary evacuation routes. We've identified that that's probably a primary concern within the county from every agency. And some agencies have done a good job to this point using local dollars, but being able to tap into the core funding will be able for us to be able to use those mitigation dollars even more throughout the county and through the evacuation routes. And then also start using some of those fundings for example, if you've identified a large shaded ridgetop fuel break, this is the point where we want to start looking at the EIR and the CEQA component to those larger projects, as opposed to wait to the time to when we're ready to start. So that way, if we've done all of our environmental work on the back end, when it's time to start the project, say next year or the year after, we're ready to go. With that, we are scheduled again to meet, hopefully in the next month or so that we can start getting our work plans back together so we can present those to the Ops Committee for review and then make any necessary changes that are required. That is the end of my report, and I'm more than willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief Martin. Board members first, questions? Wonderful course of action, Chief Martin. You're going to be the backbone of some of the initial analytical work that needs to be done in setting our course. So thanks very much. Seeing no questions at this time. Why did I do so? David, please.
Well, I have a comment, and it's to thank Chief Martin and his team for taking this on a more holistic approach. And it is that if you pull it off, it's a wonderful example of sharing amongst jurisdictions, and it could be a tremendous role model for the rest of the country, really. But thank you for taking that approach.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chief. I'm seeing some heads nodding, Chief Martin. Let's see, and I realize we haven't gone to public comment, but what I would propose is that we go through all of these and then ask public comment, if that's acceptable, since we're already through our second item. So thank you. Let's move on to item 9C, Fire Safe Marin program work. And we have, we're joined by Rich Shortall. Welcome, Rich.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks to the board for the opportunity to present. If you don't mind, I'll do a share screen to kind of march through the, host is disabled. You wanna re-enable?
You're good to go, Rich.
Great, thank you. So you all have the report here, but I think I'll just go through some of the highlights of it. Of course, probably our biggest communications and educational strategy is our monthly webinar. We put a lot of work into these. The last one was great. Chief Tyler really did a good job explaining the whole fire adapted community concepts, and then that was followed on by work from Steve Quarles and Todd Lando to reemphasize that point. The webinar, which is coming up next Tuesday, if I was to recommend to the board one single webinar that I hope you would all be able to attend, it would be that one. Because the first speaker is Jack Cohen, and Jack Cohen is really the godfather of wildfire science. He gets followed up by Steve Quarles, who's really the scientist who tests a lot of this in the laboratory. And of course, we all know Todd locally. And what this is going to focus on zero, but what it begins with is it points out why the fire adapted communities need to start from the house out. And it's very visual. There's a lot of good photographs in that. Almost every single day, I get communications from the public and whatnot, where everybody's worried about when are we going to start cutting down all the trees, because the trees are what's going to burn down my house. When you see this, it's going to dissuade you in a very powerful way from that. We have a home ignition problem. And that's why we have such a focus on home hardening and zone zero and all that. And this is really, I think, the webinar that drives home that point very strongly and should motivate the public of why we're taking the fire adapted community home out approach. So hope you can make that one. Our workshops, we actually have a really good plan now for how to do these workshops. Right now we're refining the content and they should be taking place in May. Again, there'll be 5 workshops and they'll be customized for each of the 5 zones. We're working with the Northern California landscape professionals. We've given them probably 70% of a work product of a training program for landscape contractors. This is sort of Wildfire as it applies to landscape practices 101. I think it's very good. It's interactive. It's something that they can do online, and it's a way that they can certify their employees and even very small companies that they have the basics, tools that they need to be able to make good decisions within their landscaping programs. This is a new one, and I mentioned I would talk to you more about this in the future. We're working with a group called the D Lab at UC Davis to develop a home hardening contractor program. And I think we all realize from what we're talking about, the importance of doing home hardening. It's actually difficult to find contractors to do some of the smaller projects. What the goal of this is to create basically a new program where we'll begin with a training program where we're going to try to target economically disadvantaged young adults. You don't need to be a 10-year carpentry master to do this or advanced electrician. It's more basic work than that. We want to work through either existing nonprofits or set up a new one that would hold the proper insurance and contractor's license and whatnot, and then help market this to people, and then get it out there at very widely available within the community. We're pretty excited about this, and we've had several meetings, and the project is well underway. We have quite a few participants, both from Marin and outside of Marin. Sonoma Fire Council is interested and whatnot. So We hope to come up with a very exciting proposal around this. The Get Ready 5th grade is in with the schools. I talked about that before. We keep working on more educational materials. A big one now is there's a group which is working on the upcoming training for the wildfire mitigation specialists in the Ross Valley and West Marin. And we're talking about developing materials, including training materials to help them get started. We've done a lot of work with Spanish language. We've created videos in Spanish. We have lots of stuff on our website, which is now in Spanish. And we were recently awarded a grant called the Listos Outreach Toolkit, which it's more broad than just Spanish language. It has really excellent materials that are a little bit more general in terms of disaster preparedness, but they're translated into 8 different languages. And it's not just a hit the Google Translate button. These are actually all a little bit different, and it works with people from these communities to make sure that we're addressing the concerns of their culture and presenting it in the proper way. So we'll be doing more with that. We're working with the San Rafael Fire Department and the Canal Alliance on this, and there'll be some other agencies we'll be reaching out to. As I mentioned, the support for the WIMS and the training programs coming up. We hold the online community meetings. And if you've never been to a FireWise Leaders meeting, I really recommend that you attend. They last about an hour and a half. You'll get maybe 70 or 80 people who represent the leadership. They're kind of dynamic meetings, and it's really kind of the pulse of what's happening out there in the field. And that's our job, really, to support them and to give them materials that they need to be able to move forward. I could get into it at length, but we are coming out with more and more products to help them have things to deliver to their communities that they're comfortable delivering themselves, to try to get all the information down to the lowest level possible, because that's where it's most effective in making change. The website, we're always updating it, but we're about to make a kind of a major change to it, a big reorganization. All the materials are going to stay there, but we're going to essentially make it in a way that I think is a little bit more user-friendly. It's gotten so large, it can be hard to find things. So we're working with US Digital Response on that.
And Rich, if I can step in real quick, we do have some more retreat planning that we need to do. So if you can do, the high level remainder of the report, and so we can move on.
All right, so I'll skip through this newsletters, media. The one thing I do want to bring up is the Chipper program at next week's meeting of the Operations Committee. A proposal, it's not a Fire Safe Marin proposal. This is a proposal from a planning team on how to do next year's Chipper program. Is going to come up. And then we hope to be able to have a presentation to the board at the March meeting for that. And then the last thing, we finally have the new signs for the alert and warning. And now we have to talk about who wants to get them and how we're going to put them out. It's the very advanced flip signs. They're pretty dynamic. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thanks, Rich. You've done a phenomenal amount of work, and your report is very thorough. I would really ask board members to read this report and get back to Rich. I'm particularly interested, Rich, in our future work. We don't need an answer right now, but I think with the ATC and ops and the work being done, I think it's going to be critical that we look to the future. But you guys are doing just phenomenal work. So thank you. Any board member questions? I'm seeing none. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for the continued work you're doing and the partnership. Excellent. I see we have ingress egress study report. Mark, who is going to carry that for us?
I was going to carry that forward, and it's going to be very brief because there's still a lot of work to do. We pumped the brakes a little bit, slowed down on the development of the RFP because of the implementation of the Zonehaven evacuation management platform, and it gave us the instant tool that we needed for safe evacuations. And now the ingress egress RFP is going to be more of a planning and prevention tool that will be able to rate our evacuation routes, use and give us a quantifiable score, create a map that has hot spots, and so we can be strategic about which evacuation routes that we work on, and then not have that information be static, that after we do work, we can re-input the new data in order to show what our hazards are after that. We are waiting for the full analysis of Zonehaven's product while they implement? Do you help inform the RFP? And we expect to release the RFP sometime in April or May.
Thank you, Mark. This is going to be an astounding analytical product. This can help us strategically guide our investments here in Marin. Barbara, I see you have a question.
Just a question. At one point, I thought we were going to have a presentation on what that study was about. From what I'm sensing, Mark, that it's premature to have something like that?
I think it is premature because it's going to change quite a bit after we refine it a little bit, and I didn't want to put you through 2 presentations.
Okay, and the RFP, what are you targeting to get it out? Just so I have an idea.
April or May.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. And that question, I think we need follow up on that. So thanks, Mark. Mark knows that. Any other questions from directors? And I am seeing none. Let's open public. Apologies. This is your opportunity to ask, make comments on the 4 reports you've just heard. Allison?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment. Okay, thanks. So much going on. It's wonderful. Let's move on to item number 10, which is the Director's Remote Retreat Part 2. Mark, you can provide a staff report on the retreat. We have a proposed mission, vision, and a whole lot of work that we did, which we're going to mine and move forward. So Mark, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And I see Gene Bonender has joined us. Wonderful. Yes. Welcome, Gene.
And we have Bill Keene as well. We brought our team over that we had with our retreat, minus Gina from CBI. But nice. But we do have Gina's fantastic report that Director McMillan already talked about. I thought the data that was in that report was phenomenal. But the only reason why we had good data in that report was because of the excellent and in-depth participation from all the people who participated, whether it was board members, our committee chairs and vice chairs, and then members of the public. So right up front, I wanted to thank you all for that. And for the rest of today, I'm going to, for the retreat part, I'm going to give it to Gene to discuss the vision and mission. And then Bill will talk about how we can move forward with our goals and values. Gene, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. And it's a pleasure to see you all again. I echo Mark's comments. Without your attention to detail on January 21st for the retreat and your innovation and your creative ideas and the content that you brought forward, this would be a much more difficult process. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail because on the products that came out of this, because you have those materials in your staff report. It starts on page 10 of your packet. And that's the recap of the report, as Mark indicated, was summarized for us by Gina from CBI. And there are 3 components to it. It's the core values and guiding principles are identified. And these were distilled from your discussion items. And so it's there's a mind map attached with each one of these sections that lays out the initial concepts and then the detail behind them. So core values is first. That starts on page 10 of your packet in the minutes portion. And then from there, we went to an 8-year legacy. What do you want to accomplish over an 8-year period of time? And you can see that in detail on page 12 and the mind map. And then shorter term is what do you want to accomplish within 2 years? And so that is on page 14 of the minute portion of the report. And then we go to the back half of this report, which is the staff report that starts on page 120, where Mark summarizes all of this. And out of the information that you provided, Bill and Mark and Gina and I attempted to distill your vision and mission concepts. And we also worked with the ad hoc committee that helped guide us through this entire process. We met on February 5th and reviewed the discussion and the materials and got direction from the ad hoc committee about how we could use this information to craft the language and vision and mission. So we are at that point now. Mark's report has the language, and they're both brief, and I'll read them for your ease of reference. The vision statement is: Marin County communities are informed, prepared, fire adapted, resilient, and capable of withstanding a major fire, limiting loss of life and major property damage while protecting and restoring our rich environmental diversity. And the mission statement is: guided by the best available scientific analysis, the MWPA will build ecologically sound, wildfire adapted communities through strategic investment of resources in fire prevention, community education, and evacuation and alerting systems. And then thanks to Director McMillan, who had a suggested amendment to the mission statement, which I think is clarifying. And I'd like to also ask your consideration of that. And the last portion where it says, through strategic investment of resources in fire prevention, she added, and preparation, comma, including community education, evacuation, and alerting systems. And so I believe that that was the only amendment suggested prior to this meeting. This is all draft material, and this is the suggested strategy for going forward with mission and vision. And after we take questions in this portion here, I'll be turning it back over to Mark and to Bill to talk about the next steps in this process, which includes goal setting. So I see a question from Barbara Kohler. Director Kohler.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but I have a suggested, I like Julie's change, but I have a suggested change to the mission statement that would say, before you say, so through strategic investment of resources, I think I would say through fiscally responsible, comma, strategic investment of resources in fire prevention, community education, wildfire detection, grants, evacuation, and alerting systems. I just compared that to what was in the language above to make sure, and I think one of our key functions is to be fiscally responsible to the voters. And the two pieces that I didn't see in the mission statement, and perhaps I missed it, were the grants and wildfire detection. So those are my suggested changes, but thank you. It looks like great work.
Thank you. And if you get a chance, could I ask that you send that language in writing for ease of reference to Mark, and we can look at incorporating the changes?
One suggestion, could somebody just send me those two and I'll mark them up?
Sure.
Okay,
we'll
thank
be
you.
Happy to do that. Any other? I see Director McMillan.
Yeah, sorry. I just focused on in the vision statement, it says Marin County communities, and you know, Tiburon and Belvedere are not part of this. So I'm wondering if there's a way to say the 17 member agencies that are part of the JPA or something to narrow it.
Good. Good.
Thank you.
That's a good idea. Thank you. We'll take a look at that. Any other comments or questions? And this, of course, won't be the last time that you'll have an opportunity to work on your strategy, planning, vision, mission, goals. So with that, Mark, I turn it back to you. And if you'd like to introduce Bill's portion, that would be great.
Absolutely. And so our next step after, you know, we wanted to discuss the vision and mission, and we figured that we'd have to have some refinement after today. And if you email me any suggestions you have, we can bring it back to the ad hoc subcommittee for that. And then our next step is to really start evaluating our goals and values. And I think there could be future steps down the road, but let's focus on the goals and values now. And Bill's already gotten a great start to collating that, and I wanted to hand it off to him to share his information.
Great, thanks, Mark. In terms of looking forward, today you've talked about the mission and vision, and then at the March meeting, we're already beginning to prepare for that, really to start honing in on the additional information that you provided and ideas that you provided at the board retreat back in January. So starting with core values, and then I'll talk a little bit about the goals as well. So with the core values, really they're in the report, but I'll just briefly touch on them, and we'll have some write-ups for the next, in time for your review prior to the next meeting. But essentially, this is what you had to say in your breakout groups in January. One was that prevention is your focus, and that's the main focus of MWPA. The idea of taking bold steps and actions so that your voters and communities can see what you're doing on the ground and to be accountable in all of that. This came across, the third one, really transparency and fiscal responsibility. You're even hearing that today in the comments on the mission and vision, but that came across quite clearly in the retreat. This also driven by science, that all the work that MWPA does is backed by science and the best available at that. And then sort of for your board and your community to be respectful, inclusive, and open, and really trying to get the communities to be heard as well as amongst yourselves as well. Switching over to goals, there was a lot that came out of the two questions, the 8 years and within 2 years. But just to highlight a few of these, and we're gonna write these up in time for you to review them. But really, you know, that there are specific things happening on the ground that you can measure, whether it's, and Mark talked about this earlier in the meeting, from the house on out. So we're talking about specifically being able to measure things at the house level, the community level, in the WUI, and in the wildlands, and that there's education and public awareness out there, and there's ways to measure that. And that all of this is done with preserving the environmental legacy for the county. And then, of course, not to gloss over this, the idea that your alert and notification system and evacuation routes, that there's accountability and ways to measure all of that. So we're going to take a stab prior to the next meeting at sort of outlining these, and I'm sure we'll be working with the ad hoc committee on that as well. And then with that, I'll turn it back over to Mark.
Thanks, Bill. Really appreciate it. And I really have nothing to add based on the great input that me and Bill have provided us. And we're open all to your questions.
So board, any questions on the presentation? It looks like it's a work in progress. Bill and Jean are working on our next steps. They mentioned all the information that we have that we're gonna move forward on. Vision mission is in draft, and they're gaming this out for us. We have a lot of work to do, but we laid a lot of work down and principles that we're gonna actually specifically identify goals and objectives, so, and metrics. So any questions, please? I see Julie, please.
Yeah, just on the core values section, I was hoping that there could be something about we're spending money on programs, not on administrative overhead, just kind of echoing the language in the ballot. I didn't really see that idea captured.
Great. Take a note.
Directors, let's see, I'm seeing, let's then move on to public comment on this item, please. Allison?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Thanks, Allison. So it's back to you, board. Any further discussion? and we're looking for a motion to approve, well, I think to empower Jean to accept input on the vision and mission, and provide a modification to Executive Officer Brown to share back with the board for approval and conveyance into our next phase. Is that too much?
Megan, did you have
I don't think we won't need a motion at this stage, I don't believe, because the statements aren't finalized. So I'd recommend just postponing the motion and offering direction to staff to work with Jean to finalize what will ultimately be adopted by the
Thanks,
board.
Megan. I see. Thank you, Megan, for the clarification. Rachel, please.
Thank you. I wonder if in the section on the, let me see, what section am I in? Is it in the 2 years, there's the section around partnerships. We talk about interagency, but I've heard today a lot about beyond interagency and whether that's community partnerships as well. I inferred interagency as fire departments or city jurisdictions, but I think it's implying also other community partnerships like Canal Alliance, like Multicultural Center, some of the other community partnerships that it looks like are already happening.
Rachel, are you suggesting some addition, or could you perhaps then submit your suggestions again, as in the vision mission for modification? What do we want to do with this?
I guess my question, Rachel, are you talking for mission vision, or are you talking for goals and values?
It was probably more under the goals and values.
Okay, perfect. And so we'll include that in the goals and values packet that we'll push out prior to the next meeting, so we can digest it some more at the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Directors, wonderful. Okay, we're off to a great start. Look forward to next steps. And Mark, Jean, and Bill, you're going to be guiding this effort forward, correct?
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. Information items, item 11. Any additional informational items? Seeing none. Item 12, future agenda items, please. Seeing none. Item 13, lucky 13, 4:56. It's my pleasure to thank everybody and adjourn this meeting. Next regular meeting is going to be March 18th, 2021. Thank you, everybody. Really wonderful work. Amazing, mild work. Thank you so much.
Take care of everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great evening.